Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. We're in, we're out. We have a deal on the debt ceiling. We don't. There are crazy senators saying, well, the only way we'll let this go is if we defund vaccinating people. Crazy, crazy times. And look, leave it to the Republicans to never let a good crisis go to waste when they want to push their ideology. And you got today, Mike Lee, who's way out there, Ted Cruz, who go back to Cancun already, and Roger Marshall of Kansas saying, well, we'll let that little debt ceiling thing go if you just defund the vaccine mandate. If you defund the thing that is going to help us get through this little pandemic thing. And look, Pelosi is right. When she was asked, what's the Democratic message out of this? And you go, I got to be honest, if you're sitting asking those questions, someone should smack you. And she was right. She goes, how do Republicans explain to the public that they're shutting down the government because they don't want people to get vaccinated? And that is the right question. But here's the answer. Their supporters don't care. Their supporters want to shut the government down. Their supporters don't want people to get vaccinated. Their supporters want the economy to fail and there to be chaos. Why? Well, because they have this imaginary dream that the former guy and JFK Jr., I guess they're still pulling that, somehow, magically, going to be reinstalled. Wow. How'd these people get out of grade school? Now, here's the good thing. No, Mitch McConnell, who, honestly and truthfully, I'm sure loves playing the Grinch. He said there's going to be no shutdown, probably because, he really ate it the last time. The last shutdown, people put on him. And I don't think he wants to be blamed again just before Christmas when the economy's kind of doing well. And it would give Biden the ability to go, well, if things are bad, it's because they shut everything down. But understand, these are people, quite frankly, who would burn the house down with people inside and be gleeful that it all went up in smoke, just to push their ideology. And this is the sad place we're in. I had a conversation with somebody today who said, when was the last time a Republican came forth with an idea? When was there something that came forth to solve a problem? When did they actually do something for the working class of this country? Can you name one thing, one proposal, one idea, one piece of legislation that said, we're going to do this for the betterment of the working class? We are going to help working families. Now, they've got their ideology, and I threw out a couple things. Well, they would argue tax cuts for the rich might trickle down, maybe, possibly, could maybe be a raise in your paycheck, to which the person quickly shut that down, going, no, that hasn't happened. That was the myth. That was the fantasy. Trickle down was supposed to benefit everyone because, we would give all the money to the rich people and it would flow downward like rivers of gold and honey. And it would be wonderful. Rich people would get richer. The working people would get richer too. And it would be great. We would all share in prosperity. And they sold us this kumbaya nonsense. And some of us bought it. Far too many. All the while, what they were doing is they were breaking up unions. They were doing things to make it harder for people to join and form unions, to demand some of that gold and honey. And they ended up, going, we're going to cut taxes. And they've trained a working class to think, hey, you're someday going to be a millionaire, so you don't want to tax them too much because you could be there someday, while kicking the ladder off the side of the building. And here we are in a moment, fighting over a debt ceiling that is ridiculous. As anyone knows, you sit around the kitchen table, the time that you argue about money is before you spend it. If you don't have it, that's the time you argue over it. Now, You've already spent the money. This is the thing about the debt ceiling that drives me nuts. This is simply saying we're going to pay our bills. This is the wealthiest country on the planet, the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, at its wealthiest moment going, you know what, maybe we're not going to pay our bills this month. And maybe we're going to throw the entire economy into chaos and the globe into chaos, because guess what? The world's reserved currency is the dollar, and everybody has dollars, and everybody wants to get their bills paid. Because guess what? All of the currents, all of the economic activity on the globe done in dollars. Until we booger this up, because at some point the rest of the world's got to look to us and go, you know, this is just ridiculous that we've given you this kind of power. Now, the debt ceiling is an artificial construct. It's ridiculous. It is stupid. But it's one of those nice tools that Republicans use every time a Democratic president is in power so that they can extract their pound of flesh. You may remember back during the Obama years, they got their screwquester through, which was an across-the-board cut in everything. Didn't matter what it was. And some argue that's what led to what happened in Benghazi, because we went and we cut too much. But no, you'll never get that out of the Republicans. So here's where we are, from what I understand. Maybe it's going to pass. Maybe we're going to get through the debt ceiling. Maybe McConnell will get it through. Maybe by Friday, maybe not. And then what happens? I'm sure they'll pass a continuing resolution to go to the next day or the next day. But this is not the way you run a lemonade stand, let alone the most powerful nation in the world. And it shows that the people who are in those halls of power need to go. If in this moment you're against raising the debt ceiling to pay our bills, you should leave. You should be sent the door. But where this conversation went with this person I was talking to is going like, what are they getting done? Because, this person was saying that, there's a lot of things in his life that they need. A lot of stuff in the Build Back Better plan. Money for kids to go to school. The college stuff that was in there. Because you may remember originally, free community college was in the Build Back Better plan. And it's something I've advocated for. I've said, look, we need to have an additional 2 years. 100 years ago, we decided that an 8th grade education wasn't enough, needed to go through high school. I'm now saying you need those extra 2 years. Could be community college to get an associate's degree, or more likely and better, get people into apprenticeship programs, learn a trade, a skill, and be able to have the ability to add to our economy with the kind of training instead of going deep into hock. And one of the things that I came across today that just sent me just flipping, and I've heard these stories hundreds of times. None of this is new. This person was saying, I sure hope they do something on debt forgiveness, because he was saying, I'm thousands of dollars in debt. I got my degree years ago, and this whole thing. And the story that he told was, look, there were a couple of times where I wasn't able to pay because I lost my job. You go through all of these crises. They don't give you any forgiveness. There's no, oh, you're okay. Except this last time, thank you, Joe Biden. He's going, every time I had to stop, it came with penalties and fees and all kinds of stuff. And someone sent me a tweet that was out today on someone's student loan situation. And it said the original amount that was dispersed when this person went to college was $72,879, which is a ton of money. I don't know what kind of degree. I hope you got a really good degree for that kind of money. But I was also told, look, you can go to some state schools and run that up. Going to some state schools here in Pennsylvania and across the country, which again, wasn't that way years ago. It said that the amount that this person paid to the student loan company over all these years, including interest, fees, all kinds of stuff, $96,000. So they more than paid back the student loan, more than paid it back with interest. And the remaining balance, and this is the part that just sent me going, what? The remaining balance was still $168,000. And you go, hold on, wait a second. How do you get here? And as this person was walking me through, they're going, look, every time you stop, it comes with fees for this and that and penalties. And every time you don't pay, there's compounded this and added that. And it's a huge scam. And this is something that, thousands, millions of people in this country are saddled with. When you look at the fact that we've well passed $1 trillion in student loan debt in this country, you wonder why a generation, 2 generations now, are screaming for some help. And I've said from the beginning, we should not have profiteers doing anything with student loans. Nothing. I believe that it's an investment in our society. I believe it's for the common good of our country, and it's something that we should be, if not heavily subsidizing, as we did in past generations. If you're one of the baby boomers, you got a great deal going to college. I'm looking at this and I'm going, at the bare minimum, we should say, you know what? You take out a student loan, you pay it back. No interest, no fees, no penalties. You pay back what you borrowed. To me, that's fairness. Now, this person that they sent me this thing paid back their money in excess. They should be done. But the reality is, there's still $168,000. You go, how is that possible? How is it even remotely possible? And it's how the game is rigged. It's how when you get into debt, especially when you're talking about loan sharks and payday lenders, you never get out. Once they got you, they got you. And it's things like this that need to get done. And I got to tell you, I'm hoping Joe Biden does something, through executive order, because clearly no Republican's going to get on board with this. But if you want to talk about family values, if you want to talk about how we help people, this is one area that would help families. This is one area, if you want to talk about, hey, we want people to start families. This is one area that would just be a boom for our economy. And look, I'm not advocating wiping out the debt and saying you don't have to owe it back. I'm saying you pay back what you borrowed. Maybe 1% interest, maybe 2% at most, because ultimately this is for the common good. This is for the health of our country, the health of our economy. And if we're going to be competitive around the globe, we certainly want people who are, somewhat educated, because I look around and I'm going, with all the high school graduates who are now virologists and epidemiologists, we need to do something. Maybe some remedial classes, I don't know. But it seems to me we could be doing a lot better than, we're on the brink of shutting our government down. We're on the brink of causing economic chaos. We're on the brink of causing global economic chaos in a globe that is already struggling. Because while we're hearing and complaining about, the inflation rate is so high here in the U.S. Oh, my goodness, inflation's so high. It's higher around the world. I know we like to think we're special and we're the only ones that are affected by this stuff, but everywhere else is experiencing the same thing. And for me, the idea that we have this kind of gridlock and a political party who doesn't seem to want to get anything done is just, it's mind-blowing to me. It's one of those things where you just, I never thought I would be in this place. But, this person I was talking to was saying, look, he was going through the number of legislators going, what has this person done? What has this person done? Nothing. All they've done is they've caused enough noise to be able to stand up and say, hey, look at me. Everyone's attacking me. So that must mean that I'm fighting for you. I think back years ago, and I'm old enough to remember when earmarks and pork barrel spending were possible, and the Congress people would come back and go, hey, look what we brought back. Look at what we did in the community. Look at the bridges we rebuilt. Look at the museums we had built. Look at the money we brought back for schools and hospitals and whatever. Look at what we did. We paved the road out in front of your house so you don't have to worry about your car's front end alignment for at least another 6 months. Thank you. We don't do that anymore. What we've got now are little reality stars who just want attention. The fact that Lauren Boebert is in Congress is a national disgrace. The fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene is in Congress is a national disgrace. The fact that someone like Paul Gosar is in Congress is a national disgrace. Louis Gohmert, Matt Gaetz. You can go down the list. The fact that these people are taking up space in our House of Representatives is a national disgrace. You know, there used to be Republicans. There used to be. And this is where I reach out to my Republican friends and go, look, there used to be good, decent Republicans who said, yeah, we want to pave the roads and bridges. Yeah, we want to bring opportunities back to our communities. Yeah, we're going to stand with working people and push for prevailing wage so you don't get cheated on the job. And we're going to push for union rights so you have the right to collectively bargain. And we're going to push for, you to get health care in those jobs. We're going to push to make lives better. Instead of just being the party of no and the party of destruction and the party of reality TV. This is all we're getting. And we deserve better. As a nation, we deserve so much better than the chaos and the nonsense you see going on every day. And it's a reality show. Now, the other day, we had former Alabama Senator Doug Jones on. He said, well, they talk a lot more and there's a lot more bipartisanship. You just don't see it. And that's the problem. If it is going on, and I don't not believe Senator Jones. But if that truly was going on behind doors, they better start doing it in public, because guess what? It's filtering down to we the people, to where you can't have a reasonable conversation with somebody that you disagree with anymore. There's no more debate. There's no more discussion. There's no more, hey, how do we get the roads paved? How do we make an opportunity for our kids to get an early childhood education, a good start? How do we make sure that, hey, I've yet to meet anybody who says, yeah, another 2 years of schooling wouldn't be a bad idea. I've yet to meet anyone. No, absolutely not. I'm against it. I haven't met those people. When you start saying, yeah, we should get them some job training, get them an extra couple of years and not be saddled with a lifetime of debt. These programs are popular, but what do our friends on the Republican side do? Nothing. And look, I'm not giving Democrats a pass either. You still got Manchin and Sinema and a couple others who have been holding things back. But in this moment, we got to get things done, and we got to get things done really quickly. Anyway, lots to get to, lots to talk about today. I also want to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. When we come back, Matias Vernango is going to be here to share some thoughts on inflation and where things need to go. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1859. That was the day John Brown was hanged in Charlestown, Virginia, in what is now West Virginia. He had been sentenced to death on charges of treason, murder, and insurrection for his role in the raid on the United States Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry. Brown and 21 abolitionists intended to seize the arsenal there, then build a free settlement in the Appalachian Mountains. From there, abolitionists and free people of color would wage a guerrilla war against the slave labor system throughout the South. Convicted on November 2nd, Brown resisted plans for rescue and prepared to die a martyr. And on this day, John Brown wrote his last statement. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. I had, as I now think, vainly flattered myself that without very much bloodshed, it might be done. He was marched out of the Jefferson County Jail through a crowd of onlookers that included Stonewall Jackson and John Wilkes Booth to the gallows where he was hanged. While many abolitionists distanced themselves from his actions, they defended him and memorialized him after his death. Frederick Douglass remarked many years later, his zeal in the cause of my race was far greater than mine. It was as the burning sun to my taper light. Mine was bounded by time. His stretched away to the boundless shores of eternity. I could live for the slave, but he could die for him.
Oh, John Brown's body lies moaning in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured out to save. And though he lost his life in his struggle to free the slaves, his truth is marching on.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
John Brown's body lies moaning in the grave.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So all we keep hearing from the right is, oh my God, Joe Biden's responsible for all of the inflation. It's all Joe's fault. You see a new report out that 45%, they're saying, Washington Post, 45% of households are being hurt by increased prices. They're saying that more Republicans are being hurt than Democrats. About 1 in 10 say that the hardship is affecting their standard of living. 35% say it's a moderate hardship. But you listen to the right, the sky is falling. It's the end of civilization as we know it. And yet still want to do something like hold us hostage over the debt ceiling because somehow, yeah, that'll make it better. Here to share some thoughts on where we are inflation-wise, where things may go, and if the Fed's going to pull the plug and slam the brakes on. That's why I've asked Matias Vernango to come talk with us. Matias is an economics professor at Bucknell University, one of my go-to guys. Matias, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for having me, Rick.
So I'm looking at the reports here. Inflation's horrible. It's the end of the world. Everyone's going to die. It's all over, Matias. It's the end of the world.
So inflation is higher. It's the highest. The numbers of the last numbers that I saw earlier this month. It's the highest since 2005 when the price of commodities were going up. Obviously, the price of gas has affected everybody, so it's visible. But the issues that are important to discuss. So I think there are a couple of things to bear in mind when we think about this. And we have discussed this issue because it has been an issue for a while in previous shows. But one is I don't think that the inflation was first of all caused by the programs of this, or even not that I have much positive to say about Trump, but it wasn't caused by the fiscal sort of packages during the pandemic. So what you're saying is
the spending that they did to get us through. You don't think that has anything to do with it?
Oh no, it's not that I think. It's a fact. So I mean, there is some fiction out there, but inflation has not been caused by excess demand. So the notion that the fiscal packages caused inflation, be that the first three, that all of the Trump packages passed with Democratic votes, and I must say that the Biden packages, the first one passed with no Republican vote, and the infrastructure one had some Republican votes, very few, but it had some, and the Build Back Better had not. So, and we'll see what will eventually pass. But at any rate, in order to have a fiscal policy being the cause of inflation, you have to have that the economy is at full employment, and because you're hitting the limits of the economy, then you're pushing prices up. There is no more stuff to be have and had, and so prices go up. At this point, it will take us with the growing, and the growing is it's a good recovery. We're recovering from a crisis that was humongous, that's still not over, that we still have Omicron, and we may have further shutdowns, and God knows exactly what will happen in the supply chain. But at this pace of recovery, if we keep having 500, tomorrow we have a report. So tomorrow is Friday, isn't it? Yes. So we get a report, say that's 500,000 jobs or something like that. So that we keep a good pace of recovery in the labor market. It will take us to 2020, the end of 2022, to get the same level of employment we had at the beginning of the pandemic. So we're not out of the recession, despite of what people say. I mean, the recession for me ends when there are more people, having jobs than before the crisis. That's the end of a recession, not when whatever output or the asset, the stock market goes up or anything like that. So we're not close to full employment. It's not that, we had hit the limit because we're overspending and people are, doing really well. It's because there are minor supply chain effects that have, affected some prices, and because there are snags in certain commodity prices that are central. Energy prices are the ones that grew up. So is inflation a concern? Yes. Why? Not because inflation is a terrible thing that it's the dragon that we have. I mean, unemployment is the problem, poverty is the problem. Inflation, if wages were growing faster than than prices, well, for the vast majority of people, it wouldn't be a concern. The problem is that over the last year, wages have grown slightly less than prices, and so that's the issue. It's hurting people, and I think that there is some. I was listening to what you were saying. There is some concern that Republicans are happy with that because electorally that would be a good thing, and so that's the reason why inflation has become sort of an issue. And I am, I should say, I'm not completely sure that. So there is a whole discussion even within the Democratic Party if Biden should have reappointed. Jerome Powell or should have gotten Lyle Brainard. And I tend to think that it's indifferent. I mean, I don't think that the Fed and Powell caused the inflation, and I don't think that they will do significant different things. I don't think that if they try to stop the economy a little bit, I don't think that they will be able to do it for a long while. I think that they'll be forced to continue the policies in which monetary policy is relatively loose, in which they help the Treasury fund maintaining interest rates low to fund the fiscal expansion. I think all of those things will be needed because the economy is not out of the woods. Right. And I should say the other thing that it's important because it's being used, as you said, politically, is that Build Back Better. So the further part of the fiscal package that I'm still hoping we can pass, and it's not going to be close to the size it should be, but we should pass something. That wouldn't cause inflation. Like the infrastructure plan, it's something that would increase our capacity to produce things. And exactly because of that, it will move further away the limit of the economy that if you hit, you get inflation. So fiscal policy, if done right, actually reduces the chances of inflation rather than increasing the chances of inflation. So I do hope we pass that.
I listened to one of the right-wing talking heads today and said he was going on about how all this government spending is causing all this inflation. It's giving people the ability to stay home and not work. It was just all bad all the time, all horrible. So what people are hearing is that by us spending money, investing in roads and bridges and helping people with the Build Back Better stuff, what they're thinking and what they're being told is this investment is causing inflation. Inflation is bad. It's bad. I can't buy the stuff I want. So we got to stop all of it, which is really short-sighted and dangerous in my view.
It is. And the other important part of this, so there is, as you said, an issue of the message and the media and what they unrelentlessly will sort of push. So this idea that that inflation is normally bad for the working class. So if we had the ability to push wages further up, again, this wouldn't be an issue. So part of the problem actually bellies the whole notion that we are in a situation that it's close to, the high inflation of the 70s. It's that it has been very difficult for workers to even, with all of the difficulties that people are talking about, hiring workers and whatnot, it has been very difficult for, workers to bargain higher wages. And so wages have not grown fast. We cannot even pass an increase in the minimum wage legislation. And so we're still, so this is definitely, I do hope that we actually get a little bit of good inflation, meaning if we do pass Build Back Better and we do get better conditions for workers, and the pandemic does create conditions in which workers have more bargaining power and don't need to go back to jobs that are absolutely, insecure and poorly paid and so on and so forth, then there'll be some wage resistance like in the 70s that given this supply side sort of, we don't have chips and, because of particular issues during the pandemic or the price of gas, for reasons that have nothing to do with American policy went up, then we may get some wage resistance, but that would be good, so that would be a thing that, again, we would have the equivalent of the 70s in that respect. But I don't think we're there. So I'm sorry to say that I don't think we're there. So inflation will not be the issue. The issue that is still facing us in the foreseeable future is how we get to, again, grow at levels that are, more significant with growing is not the whole thing. It's growing with incorporation of better conditions of work and better pay for workers. And in the current circumstances, I should say, it also implies, given all the effects of climate change and this, that, and the other that we have had, and we know, floods in the areas we are, fires up in the West, and so on and so forth, that we get also more spending in infrastructure to avoid all of the sort of also issues that come with that. So
you're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Matias Vernango, professor of economics at Bucknell University, talking about inflation and some of the nonsense that we keep hearing on the right about how bad it is. If you got a question, thought for Matias, give us a call. 866-416-RICK. That's 866-416-7425. Now, a second ago, you said that there's good inflation. We've been trained kind of like Pavlovian dogs that whenever we hear the word inflation, Matias, we start foaming at the mouth because it's all bad. It means higher prices, and we're not going to be able to buy our hamburgers cheap, and we're not going to be able to get things cheaply. It means bad. That's what we've been trained. It is what we've been trained.
Well, the point is, there is something that it's important to understand. The obsession with inflation and central banks obsessed with inflation comes from relatively wealthy people. So the wealthy people that depend on real remuneration on their assets don't particularly like inflation. Workers, provided wages go up further than prices, they don't necessarily lose. And so if the interest rates are low, and that's the real issue here. So what gets to Wall Street and wealthy individuals and conservatives is that interest rates are low. Interest rates being low with a little bit higher inflation means that real remuneration for several assets are sort of smaller. Of course, there is a bubble in the stock market, and that's how a lot of the money has been done by the very wealthy people. But in general, the obsession with inflation comes from the conservative camp and not from workers. So I think that there is a messaging problem, and there is an issue also that over the last 40 years, the working class has been weaker, less unions, less ability to protect itself from inflation. And so that obviously is an issue. Yeah. So I'm not saying that you should not be concerned with inflation, right. But what I'm saying is I would like to have the kind of inflation we had in the 70s, in the sense that I would not at high levels. Look at what I'm saying. I'm saying that wages are the cause, to some extent. The demands of workers require that, that prices have to be a little bit higher.
No, I go back to my grandparents who lived the mass of their work life. It was the 60s and 70s. And my grandfather, his union contract, every time inflation went above a certain percentage, he got a raise so that his wages didn't fall behind. And that, we don't have that stopgap, that safety net that generation had to make it through that high inflation, which is why you can say, look, it is hurting the working class because of higher wages, because of higher prices, because they don't have the ability to demand those wage increases like our grandparents did.
If Republicans were so concerned with inflation, they would vote everybody massively to increase minimum wages to a level that makes sense. $15. Let me say this: $15 per month per hour. At this point, given all that happened, it's not enough. We should be talking $21 per. That should be the national minimum wage. And so, we cannot afford it. Of course, we can afford it. It's absurd. The notion that we cannot afford it, it's senseless. So there is no problem with that. It wouldn't be inflationary, and also it wouldn't cause unemployment. So all of those are myths that it would cause more people with money, an ability of the economy to grow. It would cause an increase in productivity. So a lot of the higher spending if you spend well, if you spend in infrastructure, if you spend in giving better conditions for work for people, a better welfare system, all of those things go into higher productivity. People that are have good health, that have childcare, that have all of these sort of benefits, they work better. They're better at what they do. They have education. Better at what you do means lower cost of production. So even though you have higher wages, you can pay at the end less, and that's not fiction. That's in the data. So that's the issue. spending well money and expanding the economy and having higher wages would lead to less inflation. The period in which we had, which is the golden age of capitalism, as it's called, the 50s and 60s, and that starts to break down with the conservative revolution in the 70s. It's a period exactly of high wage growth, which wages going up with productivity. So there was no inflation. There was no inflation because the increases in wages were hand in hand with increases in productivity. And so that's what we had. That's the model we want to go back to.
Yeah, and this is where, I keep coming, there's a moment here where we can reset our economy to reward work, which we haven't done in a very long time, and to have a sane, rational tax code that says, the wider your shoulders, the stronger you are, the more water you carry back to the cave, the more you need to do.
Yeah, well, I think the issues of why we this is the important thing here is that this is a political issue. I don't think it's an economic issue per se. So I don't think that it's because we don't understand the reasons of what's going on. The question is political. The question I'm sorry to say is it's not just that the Republican Party has sort of acted in ways that are irrational in many ways, including the sort of populist discourse within the Republican Party. So there's a lot of working class people that vote for the Republican Party, and that's sort of scary and frightening. But it's the result of 40 years of deindustrialization and abandoning of the working class, but divisions within the Democratic Party too. So the fact that we cannot agree on passing a very robust, Build Back Better sort of package. It's part of the problem, I think. So unless we do that, we're going to have trouble next year.
Last question, real quick. Does the inflation? When do you see the inflation kind of tapping down?
Well, here's the thing. When do we see the pandemic passing? I wrote a paper, a year ago that was published around December. And one of the things I said, this was before the vaccines were out. I said, if we had vaccines, the vaccines probably will be closer to not because I knew, I was reading, what people in that field say, they will be closer to flu vaccines. So you'll end up needing boosters and shots every year. And this will lead to, we will have several other. So it may take a while. And if it takes a while, the inflation thing will stay with us for a while. So we will need these policies for a while.
Good stuff. Matias, I appreciate the time. Always great stuff, my friend.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend, Matias Vernango. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2001. That was the day that energy trading giant Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was the biggest bankruptcy in U.S. history up to that time. At its peak, the Houston-based Enron was the 7th largest company in the country. A combination of mismanagement and all-out greed sank Enron. The company used numerous accounting tricks and loopholes to hide billions of dollars of debt from its shareholders. In August of 2000, shares of the company were worth $90.75. But by November 30th, 2001, they had plummeted to just 26 cents. After filing bankruptcy, thousands of Enron employees were left to go down with the ship. Many employees and retirees had thousands of dollars worth of Enron stock. Employees were told the company would recover. They were encouraged not to sell off their stock and even to buy more, while at the same time, top executives were dumping their stock holdings. When the company went under, the employees' retirement accounts were wiped out. Some who had already retired had to re-enter the workforce. The following January, a New York Times report shared the stories of some of the 4,000 employees laid off in the immediate aftermath of the bankruptcy. One was told he lost his job by voicemail. Another was told he had 30 minutes to clear out his desk. Multiple lawsuits won a portion of the money back for Enron stockholders. But the employees lost more than $2 billion in retirement funds. In the end, more than 20 top executives were found guilty for the crimes they committed while running the company. Enron became synonymous with the corporate greed that has been the hallmark of 21st century America. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday we talked a little bit about the National Labor Relations Board, the General Counsel. That's Jennifer Abruzzo, I think is how you pronounce her name. But she came out with a couple of tweets that I said, this is what we need. Someone in that position who understands that workers have the right to strike and employers shouldn't have the right to replace them permanently. It's not the intent of the law, as I've read. It's not the intent of the law, as a lot of my labor lawyer friends have read. But sadly, through bad decision after bad decision, it's where we are. So when an employer like Kellogg's, threatens, hey, we're going to start permanently replacing people, take it at face. When St. Vincent's Hospital up in Worcester, Mass. says, sorry, we're not going to let all of your people come back because we're keeping some of the scabs, that's a problem. And here to share some thoughts on, the General Counsel's thoughts on maybe if it's possible for us to get back to a place where strikes are actually, a right. I've asked our good friend Shaun Richman to come talk with us. Shaun's a contributing writer over at In These Times. He's also the author of Tell the Bosses We're Coming, a new action plan for workers in the 21st century. Shaun, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
So did you, I'm sure you saw the tweets by the General Counsel. I think everyone in labor circles saw it because it's a great sign, isn't it?
It's a very encouraging sign, yes. And there are already memes about this. It's like, when the General Counsel starts a tweet thread with the National Labor Relations Act says this, and has the little tweet like emoji. It's like, this is going to get good. It's an open invitation for unions to turn back this really terrible Supreme Court decision from 1938 that has never really been properly reevaluated, questioned, whatever, was weaponized by the vast right-wing movement of corporations and the Reagan-Bush administration in 1983 at Phelps Dodge. And really turned strikes into a scary word for a lot of workers because it turns strikes into a thing that can cause you to lose your job. When the plain language of the National Labor Relations Act, as the General Counsel is saying, says strikes are protected. This act is meant to protect your right to strike. You're allowed to go on strike, but somehow these very ill-considered court decisions and other actions by corporations turn the tables on unions very effectively in the Reagan-Bush era and continuing into the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, they spend a lot of money on it. Now, yesterday when I saw the tweets come out, my mind goes, well, why now? What brought this out? And then I remembered you had written a piece back in October kind of laying this argument out. How much of it do you think was your doing, or was it just, it was time?
It was time. It was time.
Now I'm going to give you credit for it because you deserve it.
But it was time. I mean, what I like to do, what I try to do is say, like, guys, this thing, why aren't we doing this? And the history here is frustrating in a lot of ways, right? So, it's a bad Supreme Court decision from 1938. For the most part, it just lays dormant because most employers would not permanently replace their workers who go on strike. It was beyond the pale. And it was only when Phelps Dodge dared their copper mining employees out on strike over draconian cuts in health benefits, pension, pay, whatever else, and then immediately bust in thousands of scabs, and then waited them out for a year so that the scabs could then decertify the union. That created the template, the blueprint for this is how you bust a union.
Right. And
it went like wildfire throughout all those years. And so when Bill Clinton comes into office in 1993, the AFL-CIO's top legislative goal is to end the use of permanent replacements by amending the National Labor Relations Act. And it gets stymied by what was then a rare filibuster.
Bob Dole.
Although the beginning of filibusters becoming the norm. Clinton tried some executive action on it, and he got overturned by the courts. And, you know, what labor didn't do back in 1993 is to say, you know, how about we just make the NLRB do its job? Because the plain language of the McKay decision says that, you know, okay, fine. If it's necessary for an employer to protect and continue his business, then he can hire permanent replacements, but he can't have union busting as his main goal. And so there's two components to that, right? Like, we all know that a union that goes on strike over ULPs generally is protected from permanent replacements. But ULP is a fairly high standard, whereas wanting to get rid of your union is a lot more plainly obvious, right? Phelps Dodge bargaining their workers to impasse over the pension and the health benefits was legal. They didn't break the law in terms of the way they bargained, but they very clearly wanted to get rid of the union. And we can all point to other examples of this. You know, the Comcast workers in New York City, the cable company, where a new employer comes in, they buy the company, and they like, no more pension, no more this benefit, no more that. You clearly want to get rid of the union. So that's anti-unanimous, which there's almost no case where an employer does hire permanent replacement scabs where they're not looking to get rid of the union. But the other component, and this is in the plain language of the McKay decision, is if it's necessary to protect and continue your business. So over at St. Vincent's in Massachusetts, where the employer has agreed to all of the strikers' economic demands, they can afford the contract. They just want to punish the strikers and keep some of the permanent replacement scabs on. Okay, why is that necessary to protect and continue your business? How would you go out of business? Like, you're not out of workers. The scabs go on a rehire list. The strikers come back. Where's your economic interest here? And so this general counsel is finally getting back to something that the labor movement should have demanded back in 1993. And I think we didn't because we were, I was 14 years old. We were slightly, you know, we took a jaundiced view of the NLRB. We viewed it as sort of a broken system. Reagan and Bush had totally broken it. We had no faith in it. And our faith was in legislation. And we went to Congress expecting, like, this is a reasonable minor fix. You know, this accidental Supreme Court decision, the right wingers blew a hole in it the size of a Mack truck. Let's fix it. And that was like one of our first tastes of the fix is really in here.
Yeah.
This goes back to
no, you're right, and it goes back to Reagan and the push for the Republicans and the Reagan Democrats and all of this rebuilding of the Republican Party into one that is vehemently anti-union. Because I remember, and I'm not much older than you, I remember there being pro-union Republicans, and you could barely find one now, but they existed in the past. I know it's hard to believe, but they did.
There might be one on Staten Island. Yeah. And that's you know, I read a lot of books about every 5 to 10 years. There are folks in my world, in labor education circles and think tanks, pull together these edited, you know, collections of essays and research studies, and it's like, here's what it's going to take to restore the labor movement. And I've got like 20 of them on my shelf here. And what labor is really bad at is we jump on one thing where we're like, that's it. And then we forget the other 19 really good ideas.
Right.
And so in 1993, like that's it was, we're gonna get a legislative amendment to the National Labor Relations Act to you know, prevent employers from hiring permanent replacements, right? You flash forward, you know, a decade later, and now it's EFCA, and card check is the main solution. And like, we just forget, like, this. What Abruzzo is trying to do is, you know, she's trying to adhere to a stricter interpretation of the McKay decision. You know, she's not going to overturn McKay. She can't. It's a Supreme Court decision. But the strict reading of it is, you can only hire permanent replacements if it is economically necessary to protect and continue your business, and your ultimate goal is not to break the union.
Right.
Find me an employer where that's the case. Find me one. It's definitely not Kellogg's. It's definitely not St. Vincent's.
So this is where her next tweet comes out. She says, in a recent memo, GC Abruzio said she'll examine whether a change is necessary to the permanent replacement doctrine to fulfill the mission of the act. Thus, if a charge is filed involving this issue, she'll consider whether it's appropriate to ask the NLRB to reconsider the law. This sounds to me kind of like a, hey, if anybody's out there listening, bring me something.
I know. No, I mean, like, I think I ended my piece in these times of like, please, for the love of God, file the ULP. And like, there's a bunch of us on Twitter, including, your, I think he used to work for you, Banticelli, file the ULP. It's like almost a hashtag at this point. Like, just file the ULP, do it. They're begging for it. They're going to take it seriously, make the case. St. Vincent's and Kellogg's are the best test cases at this point for that. They should file those ULPs and like, let's see where it goes. And I've already, I'm already hearing some of the sort of the unintended consequences. Like if it goes to, if the NLRB goes to a stricter McKay standard, then the bosses are going to take this to the courts, and then we're dealing with the, Trump's federal courts, and we're dealing with a McKay that has the appearance of stare decisis. And the worries here, and it's almost like a boogeyman worry, is could we get a worse decision out of the Supreme Court? And I'm just like, what would be worse?
Exactly.
We already don't have the right to strike.
Exactly.
What are they going to do to us at this point?
I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Shaun Richman. He's a contributing editor over at In These Times. He's also the author of Tell the Bosses We're Coming, a new action plan for workers in the 21st century. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. If you got a question, comment, something for Shaun, quick, you can jump in, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, here, I want to change gears a little bit. Today, Major League Baseball locked out their players and their workers. And the first story I read over at yahoo.com was it's a work stoppage. And I know this is just kind of, semantics, but it's not a work stoppage. The billionaire owners threw the people out to the curb.
Well, it says how disappointed I am in my own New York Mets that this is actually news to me. This is how much attention I'm paying to baseball. But yeah, no, or I mean, if you might have seen this like clip of this New Orleans TV station when workers at some delivery company in New Orleans went on strike at dawn. And this like cubby reporter shows up and like she's like, and they call themselves the Teamsters and they're out here, they're protesting for their rights, and they say this isn't fair. She's like, she has no, like there's no vocabulary left for most reporters, which is true. Although on the flip side of it is like we're really blessed by a number of mostly print or digital reporters who have organized their own newsrooms, and now they know it. And suddenly we have this great crop of some of the best labor reporters that we've had since Abe Raskin croaked, that they understand it at a deeper level. But I can tell you from experience, it's not taught in J school. I mean, no. my minor at Queens College. But it's one of those things. I guess it's just a little pet peeve. But to go back to you had said a bit ago that employers didn't fire their workers. They didn't take advantages in the past. Could it be that the community wouldn't have allowed it? Could it be that the company would have reacted differently? Because I had someone tell me back when I was a kid. It's one of those. When I was a kid, he's a little bit older than me. He said you couldn't trip over someone and not hit a union member because union density back in the 70s was somewhere in the 28-30% range. In the 60s, it was as high as 40%. Even when I started working, it was over 25%. So, the culture was everyone knew somebody who was in a union, and you didn't want that guy to lose their job. And also you wanted them to do well because you probably did better too. I mean, I can tell you stories of management coming out to us in negotiation going, get a good deal because whatever you get, we're going to get too. That's how things used to work. Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case, right? And so it's partly in the 1970s, with stagflation, folks were feeling a pinch. Union density was just starting to decline throughout the 1970s. And so the spillover effect of, GM wins something, and if GM wins a 3% raise, you were going to tend to get at least a 2% raise, even if you had nothing to do with auto. That was starting to decline. You had much more critical coverage of unions within the media, and not just like news media, even just like pop culture media, right? Like you and I could both sort of list off a bunch of movies in the 70s where, just the general sort of frustration with management was also loaded up with the frustration of the union, because it just felt like the bureaucracy and people weren't with us. And then, Phelps Dodge, 1982, 1983, right? That neatly lines up with Paul Volcker's shock to the system to deal with inflation of just like, we're going to ramp up unemployment. We're going to reduce the power of workers so that wages stop going up. That's what made it so that Phelps Dodge could bus in, 1,000 scabs who were willing to, cross state lines, get put up in a hotel, face those ugly picket lines, and take those jobs away from those workers. Things got incredibly ugly there. And that's what made the permanent replacement strategy work. What's interesting about this moment, obviously, is that I will not call what's happening right now a strike wave. Strikes are back in a very real way, and that's very heartening. And strikes are back because workers are feeling a bit of their own power. They know that bosses have to compete over them, and they're much more willing to say, this is not good enough. You got to give us a raise, or I'm out of here. I'm going to quit. If I'm non-union, I'm going to go on strike. If I'm union, and that is some of the noise that I think is adding to the general counsel's tweet storm the other day, and also to, I'm sure there are conversations that are taking place, right? And I'm sure that there are folks at the international unions and at the law firms in DC who spent most of their careers probably thinking that strikes scare workers and we can't talk about strikes. They're suddenly feeling like, oh wait, workers are ready to go on strike again, and we need to protect that, because that's how we win.
That is how we win. Shaun, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend. Good stuff. Our good friend Shaun Richman. Make sure you check out his book, Tell the Bosses We're Coming, a new action plan for workers in the 21st century. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2009. That was the day that Walmart agreed to pay $40 million to over 87,000 current and former employees in Massachusetts. This was the largest class action settlement in the state's history. The lawsuit, filed in 2001, accused the retail giant of denying workers rest and meal breaks. The company also allegedly refused to pay overtime, manipulated time cards, and required workers to work off the clock for free. In other words, Walmart was accused of wide-scale wage theft. The retail giant decided to settle the case rather than take it to trial. That was not too surprising, since the company had already settled 63 similar federal and state class action wage and hour lawsuits. The total tally Walmart paid out due to wage theft was a whopping $900 million. Under the terms of the Massachusetts agreement, any person who worked for Walmart from August 1995 to the settlement date received a payment between $400 and $2,500. The company was also required to put measures in place to ensure that wage theft stopped. This included a hotline that workers could call anonymously if they were made to skip meal breaks. Walmart also agreed to use a clock-out, lockout program that prevents workers from using store cash registers if they are not actually clocked in for work. In an affidavit filed with the settlement, the lead counsel for the employees said the accord dwarfs settlements of similar class actions against Walmart across the country. Not surprisingly, the company has strenuously resisted all efforts by its store employees to join and form unions. Wage theft, not getting paid for all of the hours you actually work, continues to be a major complaint of low-wage workers and is an important issue for today's labor movement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Here they come again. That gaggle of Washington politicos and pundits who keep assailing Joe Biden's package of FDR-ish proposals that, at long last, would begin lifting up America's infrastructure and working class. Too big, screech these small thinkers and servants of the plutocratic order. Too costly and, well, too democratic. You would expect such adamant menginess from anti-everything Republicans, but these are Democrats. Well, sort of. They're Chicken Little Democrats, a subset whose members fastidiously call themselves middle-of-the-road moderates. Actually, though, you can almost always find them hugging the right-hand lane, clucking that the party of the people is scaring the people with policies that, get this, directly benefit the people. This was their excuse when one of their own political adherents, Terry McAuliffe, recently lost the Virginia gubernatorial election. It's their fault, cried the mods, claiming that poor Terry lost because progressives refused conservative demands to slash key Democratic reforms from Biden's infrastructure bill. They claimed that cutting progressive proposals from the bill would have made it more acceptable to Virginians. As one political columnist wailed, had congressional Democrats given voters a reason to turn out, that would well have made the difference. But wait, it's the job of the candidate to motivate voters. McAuliffe, a lackluster peer of the business-as-usual Washington power structure, ran a lousy campaign, basically assailing his Republican opponent for being a clone of Donald Trump. True, but besides not being Trump, what was Terry offering to grassroots families to excite them about voting for him? This is Jim Hightower saying, and guess what would have been a winning issue for him? That big progressive version of Biden's infrastructure bill. It happens to be very popular among the voters McAuliffe needed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think the funniest story I've seen today, maybe you know the name Joel Osteen. He's a televangelist. To me, another charlatan. One of those guys who talks about the Bible and talks about, love thy neighbor and all that stuff. But when there's a hurricane and a flood, slams the doors of his megachurch so nobody comes in because he's got to stay away from those people. Understand, his church I think it was the Summit in Houston. It was a basketball arena where the Houston Rockets used to play. Yeah, that's the church, a giant arena. And a couple years ago, I guess it was, 7 years ago now, 2014, his church was ripped off. They claimed about $600,000 in cash and checks were stolen from a safe in Osteen's Lakewood Church there in Houston. And nobody knew what happened to it. They offered a bunch of money for it. Nobody came around with it. It was just gone. Well, evidently a plumber was fixing a wobbly toilet, removed some tiles from the wall, and lo and behold, bags of checks and money totaling $600,000. They found it. And evidently the church didn't give him the $25,000 reward for finding it. So he got stiffed, not surprising. But I'm curious, how'd that money get in the wall and for whose benefit? You gotta wonder. Look, I've got no faith in these charlatans. I wouldn't be surprised if the folks at the top were the ones shoveling it in the wall. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our favorite reporter, Sarah Burris. She's a reporter over at RawStory, RawStory.com, their website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Thursday.
So, what do you make of the $600,000 in the wall behind the commode?
Karma. Ahoy, Captain Karma! Permission to come aboard. This is. First of all, let's talk about how great the plumber is, right? plumber needs to get his $25,000 because that's just what's right and just about this situation. Also, I can't help but marvel at the fact that it was a plumber that found it. It just makes me think of Watergate and and all of the funneled money there. But I mean, I wonder what was on the other side of that wall, because if it's his office, that's going to be
that's a little shady.
But I mean, honestly, that guy's teeth are way too white. Like, I just don't trust somebody who's got teeth that white. That means he's not drinking coffee or red wine, and that's just not right.
Yeah, I mean, but $600,000 in a weekend. Stop and do the numbers of what the kind of money that they bring in for a year, and guess what? They don't pay any taxes on it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the question: is, did he think that hiding the money in the wall meant that he didn't have to pay taxes on it because it was, in the church?
No, I wonder about the insurance. I mean, I'm sure it's all insured. How much did an insurance company lay out and all of that? For me, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes, and very excited to see where it's going to go. But hey, speaking of shady, good segue into David K. Johnston's book. David K. Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist, new book out. I think you've gotten it. The Big Cheat, how Donald Trump fleeced America and enriched himself and his family. He's saying in his book that Trump and the Trump Organization pocketed a cool $1.7 billion in their time in the Oval Office. I got to tell you, I think it sounds a little low to me.
It kind of does sound a little bit low, but one of the things that I can't help but notice is that if you go through all of the money that Trump lost, particularly during the pandemic, which was really rough on him, I don't think he broke even with the 1.7. I don't think that results in, all of his golf clubs and his condos and everything that emptied out in Manhattan, because the Tiffany's lease came up in Trump Tower, and I mean, just a lot of bad things happened to him in 2020.
Yeah, it makes you go back to that, the statement that he didn't really want to win, that the whole "I'm going to run for president" was just a leverage to get more money out of The Apprentice, and when he ran. Then it became, I'm going to try and bilk this for what I can. And then the ego trip that comes with it. But, honestly, I would have been happy had he lost and had his leverage and gone on to do The Apprentice for 4 more years. I'd have been completely happy with that. We wouldn't have gotten fleeced. He'd have been happy. It'd have been a win-win.
I don't know if he could have lasted 4 more years. They could have done a contract for that long, but I think they would have ended up buying him out because the ratings on that show were dropping big time.
But here's the thing,
who knows?
In the same vein, the book points out that, Trump sold his Beverly Hills mansion for twice of what it was to some Indonesian media baron. And you go, is nobody paying attention to this?
It was not just that, too. It was an Indonesian media baron that he was promising that he was going to do some big deal with. And it was like a deal that he's been promising for a long, long time. And right up until I guess this August, I think that was the first time that the dude was like, "Oh yeah, they're in a holding stage right now over at the Trump Organization. We're gonna let them figure stuff out first, and then we're gonna bring him in." He's Indonesian. I don't know why I'm talking like he's an idiot dude from Texas. But yeah, basically this amazing, massive $7 billion development that's supposed to be like the new Hollywood of Asia. That's what Trump was investing in when he was going to build there, and that's not happening now.
Oh, I'm sad. But David K. Johnston goes through this, and in the book details how him being president kind of screwed up the business and the grift that he was used to. Because look, you listen to when he was running for office, there were a lot of people coming out saying, he screwed me over this way, and bankrupted me this way. It's kind of hard to do that when you're sitting in the Oval Office.
Yeah, so there were all these people that basically he would just go through investor after investor after investor, and he would just keep screwing them up. But there were always more investors. Well, whenever he became the president, he really couldn't do the same sort of con that way, particularly when you've got all of these requirements that a president has to file disclosures and, everything else. And if he's not going to divest himself from his business and put everything in a blind trust like he said he was going to do, then he's basically just like digging himself, a big financial hole and shoving it in the bathroom wall, or, it's just not. It's not gonna work out for you, man.
But doesn't that play into the Trump supporters? He had a great life and he's lost a bunch of money. He loves the country. Doesn't it play into that kind of jingoistic rhetoric that we hear?
Well, what's interesting about it is that, and David K. Johnston talks about this a little bit in the book, is it's really just consistent with all of his business. This has been who he is since the very beginning, and we've, early on in his campaign, folks were talking about how if he had just taken the $10 million that his dad gave him and just invested it and left it there, then he would be richer now than he was if, he built this business around it, because he's lost that much money. He screwed up that many businesses. So, he's a crappy businessman who kept being a crappy businessman and then, threw his money in the toilet,
right into failing upwards and becoming president and putting us in the mess we're in now. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. Sarah is a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com, the website. You want to check out the work that she does. The question that I have, Sarah, is how the kids doing? I saw you've written a couple of pieces on Jared and Ivanka on how they've been doing. I guess they bought some nice real estate from this Chilean billionaire. Got a good deal on it too.
Yeah, they got some serious bank, and it turns out they've made a whole bunch of money working while they were in the White House. They were not taking a salary, I guess. I don't know if Jared was, but Ivanka wasn't. And they apparently made hundreds of millions of dollars while they were working in the White House. And now all of those relationships, particularly the ones in the Middle East, Jared is basically turning those into his own pet investment firm that he's running out of Miami. And, he's using all of the money from the Saudis and, all the other countries that he could convince to invest in. So
now all this stuff is out here. And look, I'll be honest. I know my Trump supporter friends aren't going to care. He's just a good businessman and taking the opportunity when it arises. He's a go-getter. I get that. But some of this stuff has got to be illegal. And at some point, doesn't someone have to look into this and hold them accountable? I mean, don't they have to sign some kind of disclosures? Don't they have to sign affidavits that they're not going to line their pockets and do what they've done? Isn't there something somewhere?
One of the things I found interesting that I didn't know before, or I guess I didn't read about it, I don't even know how many people knew, but when they decided that they were going to file their financial disclosure forms, you fill those out under perjury, under penalty of perjury. So if you're not telling the truth on those things, then it is like you are in serious legal trouble. And they instead renegotiated it so they would file based on some kind of assumption, some sort of assumed reality instead.
I had my fingers crossed.
Yeah, and it just seems like that whole thing seems super shady to me. Like, how do we even know that this was really the truth? Ivanka's money, particularly in 2020, you can even look through her financial disclosures, how much money she was making from the Washington hotel. And it was something like $7 million. And then in 2020, it fell down to 1.5 million. And the investment, the actual money that she valued, her share of the hotel at dropped from something like, 20 million, or I think it's something like 25 million to 500 million, because that's not the world's biggest, gas there. And it dropped to something like 200,000 to 500,000. It's like, man, I mean, we knew that he lost a lot of money, but it's just like, holy crap, you are the worst businessman in the face of the planet if you lost that much money.
Yeah.
I mean, geez.
Yeah, well, look what he did to the country. He did run up $1 trillion deficits each year, and that was without the pandemic. So, no surprise. And this is the thing that gets me. And I hear this from my conservative friends all the time. Well, he was such a good president. He made the economy better. I'm going, yeah, with $1 trillion in excess spending. look, I can throw a good party too with $1 trillion.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if you have the Congress and the Senate to give it to you, then you can pass some pretty amazing legislation. And the fact that he somehow couldn't manage to pass the transportation bill under his presidency, when he had infrastructure week after infrastructure week, they had the House, they had the Senate, and really the only thing that they passed was that tax bill.
That's it.
The Republican tax bill. That's the only thing that they got out of them in 2 years when they had that much power. I mean, at least Biden got the stimulus package and the infrastructure package, which still isn't even as big as we would like for it to be. But, I mean, that's just a complete and utter failure as a president, and I think as a party.
No, it's crazy. And, you look at the fact that the reports that have come out is Trump did everything he could possibly do to stop the infrastructure bill from going through. And you go, had you done that from day one, we wouldn't have gotten the cute picture of him driving the truck all angry looking. Not that he could drive the truck, but we'd have gotten something done. And then there he was trying to hold it up.
Yeah, he screwed it up because it looked like it actually could have happened in 2019. But because the Democrats were investigating him, he basically said, no, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And Pelosi at the time was like, I knew he was gonna try and find a way out of this. Well, now when Biden was in office and trying to negotiate everything, Trump was talking to all of his friends in the Senate saying, you guys can't support this, you can't support this. Well, then finally, when that didn't work, the week of the vote, when Republicans were going to vote in Congress on the bill, Trump is working the phone, calling every single member of Congress that he knows and threatening them and saying, you cannot vote for this. You absolutely cannot vote for this. We're talking about communities that need this money. They need these bridges. They need they need to replace all the lead pipes, the crumbling sewer systems, all of these things that are super important. And Trump is so angry that the country is getting it under somebody else that he basically just wants to kill the whole thing and destroy the country. Like, who the hell are you, dude?
He's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
This is what you expect from him. And I'm not surprised. I am not surprised because look, it's that mentality. If I can't have it, if I can't do it, nobody can, and let everything burn down. So I'm not even in the least bit surprised by what we see here.
Oh, it's so sad. And it's, stuff like this is coming out too at the time of year when everybody's supposed to be doing everything nice for each other and you're filled with warmth and love and family. And you read this stuff and you're just like, God, what a sleaze bag. Like, how did I function for 4 years rushing to write every single little thing that this dude was dealing with?
Yeah, no, it's crazy stuff. But fortunately, down the road, hopefully we don't see him again. But Sarah, I appreciate the time. As always, great work. Keep it up. Look forward to your next articles. Thanks so much.
Yeah, have a good weekend, everybody.
Good stuff. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at RawStory.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Quick break. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1859. That was the day John Brown was hanged in Charlestown, Virginia, in what is now West Virginia. He had been sentenced to death on charges of treason, murder, and insurrection for his role in the raid on the United States Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry. Brown and 21 abolitionists intended to seize the arsenal there, then build a free settlement in the Appalachian Mountains. From there, abolitionists and free people of color would wage a guerrilla war against the slave labor system throughout the South. Convicted on November 2nd, Brown resisted plans for rescue and prepared to die a martyr. And on this day, John Brown wrote his last statement. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. I had, as I now think, vainly flattered myself that without very much bloodshed, it might be done. He was marched out of the Jefferson County Jail through a crowd of onlookers that included Stonewall Jackson and John Wilkes Booth to the gallows where he was hanged. While many abolitionists distanced themselves from his actions, they defended him and memorialized him after his death. Frederick Douglass remarked many years later, "His zeal in the cause of my race was far greater than mine. It was as the burning sun to my taper light. Mine was bounded by time. His stretched away to the boundless shores of eternity. I could live for the slave, but he could die for him."
Old John Brown's body lies molding in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured out to save. And though he lost his life in his struggle to free the slaves, his truth is marching on.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
John Brown's body lies molding in the grave.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind? We'd love to hear it. You got an email during the break, and thank you, Jim Walker, for sending that. He points out that the Greyhound workers went on strike on March 2nd of 1990. He said the company hired scabs, permanent replacements. The labor board ruled after 3.5 years on the strike, 1993, that the strike was a legal strike, but the company had the right to keep the scab workers. But the union could come back to work as needed and maintain their seniority as they were reinstated. He says the last members returned to work in mid 1995. The union signed up all the scabs as union members immediately following the labor board's decision. Today, 2001, one of the scabs is now the national union president, ATU Local 1700. And look, I remember the Greyhound strike, and that was one of those things that, that's what they went through. And good on him for coming around. I'll be honest with you. Once you have that stink on you, I don't see how anybody comes around to supporting you. But hey, good on them for getting past it. But I remember that strike. I was in Cleveland at the time, and the reality, it was a violent strike. There was lots of stuff going on, and this is where I come back to. It doesn't have to be this way. When these companies feel they have the upper hand and they can do this, it puts people's backs against the wall. Nobody wants a strike. Nobody. I've been on strike in my life, wanted no part of it. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do to maintain your wages, hours, conditions, to get some of the wealth that your labor creates. In this country, we have the right to strike. This idea that you could permanently replace somebody is ridiculous. And our law says that, and this is the part that gets me, the original intent of the law was not to allow the permanent replacement of people. It wasn't. And I come back to, it was the culture. 1990 was a different era than it is now. 1960 was even different then. I listened to the stories of my grandparents' generation and people who fought the labor battles. Remember, work in this country was really, really difficult and low paying. Before workers had the right to organize, before it was a right, we still had people organizing and trying and fighting, even though there was no law behind them. And they still were fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, but not as effectively. The skilled trades did well, but the truck drivers, the factory workers, those were horrible jobs until they were union jobs. And I think back to my grandparents. My grandparents got married. My grandfather got out of the military, during World War II. Got married, got his first job shoveling coal off the back of a coal truck, making 17 cents an hour, and then up to the minimum wage of 25 cents an hour. And then the union came in and made their lives better. They went from being, basically living in their car to leading a middle-class existence on one income. That is very difficult to do today. And it's all because of the union. It's all because of the wages that were paid and earned. This wasn't something that they were gifted. There was no benevolent corporation. They didn't do that. But you also didn't have a CEO making 300 times what the average worker was making. You didn't have gazillion-dollar CEO pay. You didn't have, $200 million golden parachutes. You had a society that wouldn't tolerate it. And this is where I keep coming back to. We need to learn our labor history, which is why one of the things we do here on this program is air our labor history into. Because it tells us what happened in the past, what built what we take for granted, what built our ability to have a weekend, to get paid after 40 hours. And when I started working, 8 hours was the day, and you got paid overtime after 8 hours. There was none of this wait till 40 nonsense. And slowly but surely, the wealth class of this country, the corporate class of this country has destroyed what the greatest generation built. People fought, bled, and died for the 8-hour day. The mantra, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will, is what built the 8-hour day. People died. And, my friends in Chicago know this as well as anyone with the Haymarket affair. People died for what we take for granted. And we don't know about that because we don't teach it in schools. Very few schools teach labor history. When I was in school, what I learned about labor's history was about the Molly Maguires and that they were criminals. You didn't realize that the ancient order of Hibernians was an actual group who were fighting to make the mines safer, to make wages better, to make living conditions better for people in the community. But no, they're criminals. Why? Because they wanted a fair share of what their labor created. Now understand, from the end of World War II until the middle 70s, and you can look this up, how we love to believe that our economy is this great meritocracy. That, you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. We've all heard that, right? From the end of World War II to the middle 70s, that was true. Productivity and wage gains walked hand in hand. The more productive you were, better pay you got. And there's a great graph out there that shows it. You walked hand in hand. Sometime middle 70s. Neoliberalism, the conservative movement takes hold, this whole corporate mentality. The Powell memo in 71 starts the conservative movement's push towards saving free enterprise, which means, a heavy media blitz against those dreaded unions, which means setting up the Heritage Foundation to come up with bad ideas for model legislation, the American Legislative Exchange Council, to push those bad ideas into Congress and all over politically, all with the aims of making work less prosperous, slowing the ability of workers to bargain for better wages, hours, conditions. And they've been very successful, to the point to where there is a generation now that knows nothing about labor unions. And Shaun Richman, said a moment ago, a reporter went out to cover a story, and they call themselves the Teamsters. When I was a kid, when you saw those horses on someone's jacket, you knew there was someone who made a decent living. I tell the story often. I went into a local high school one time, and I had my Teamsters jacket on. A kid goes, "Yeah, I see you work with horses." And I joked, "Yeah, I'm a jockey." Thought it was funny, but I missed an opportunity. I could have educated that kid. Because when I saw that as a kid, I thought that's a way out of the projects. That's a way to a better life. That's a way to prosperity and opportunity. And what the right has masterfully done, and what the corporate class has masterfully done, is they've spun a tale of unions putting companies out of business, which is ludicrous, of unions being greedy and only care about themselves and being self-centered. And of every time there's a strike, it's the employee's fault. Because unions don't do a very good job of tooting their horn. They don't do a very good job of communication. They don't do a good job of PR. They need to do a much better job of telling their stories, which is reality, union job, better life. That's simple. End of story. When I was a kid, I saw the neighbor. He got a job at the Ford plant, a UAW job. Immediately, within the first week, you saw their lives got better. They had food at the end of the month. in my neighborhood, that was a luxury. A couple of weeks, you saw the kids had secondhand bikes. For school, the kids had better clothes. They bought a secondhand car. They eventually moved up and out. Their lives got better because the work that they did was rewarded. Now, I'm a work guy. I don't believe in handouts. I believe in people have to go to work. There's an opportunity in this moment. And if, Joe Manchin is against the idea of, we're not going to give out any welfare, bring forward a works plan. I believe, and I've believed this from the beginning, there should be no handouts. There should be no welfare programs. None of that. There should be jobs programs. And those jobs should pay a living wage. If the private sector can't or won't, more likely won't create enough jobs, the public sector has to. And if we did that, if we truly had full employment, you would see wages find a much higher position because, hey, people have to have jobs. And people are going to demand that those jobs pay and pay a decent wage. So we're in this competing world right now. We're in this competing world of corporate interests saying, no, we want to slow wage growth. We want to crush wage growth. We want to move the responsibility of health care and retirement security onto the back of the workers, not onto the government. No, we can't have that because that would give workers an opportunity to move around. No, we still want them tied to this job. But we're going to shift the costs onto their back. There was a point where health care was paid for by the employer. It's part of your compensation package. Now they've trained us to believe all of us should be paying for our health care. And it's almost, I've talked to people who believe it's like an abomination if someone doesn't. They look at union members and go, you get health care and you don't have to pay for it? No, I pay a lot for it. It just doesn't come out of my pocket. It comes out of my compensation. But it's almost like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't have that. And I'm going, when did we become that country? When did we become the country that says, if you have something, you shouldn't have it because I don't? I remember a country where if you had something and I wanted to go, hey, how do I get that? How do we both have that? How do we both do better together? Because understand, there's a force in this country right now. Our corporate class is pushing this idea of taking us back to the days of 100 years ago, where if you were desperate and hungry enough to work for poverty wages in desperate conditions, hey man, that was your right. It was your liberty. And they exploited that. And workers were exploitable and expendable. And we're moving back to that. Every time I talk to people, I've got this, gig job. I'm doing, this dash or that lift or this thing, or, I'm my own boss, taking on all the risks, all the responsibilities, and not getting all of the profit, while simultaneously destroying employment, the kind of employment that provides Social Security when you get older, Medicare when you get older, pays into unemployment insurance, so if you lose your job, pays into workers' compensation in the event that you get injured. That's the thing these gig folks don't bother to tell you. You're taking all the risks. And what's frustrating to me is, they're doing a great job selling it. They really are. Slick PR campaigns. I see some of these ads. Oh my gosh, this young girl's flashing cash around in large wads. You go, holy wow, she's making bank. Yet the people I know doing those jobs, it's more of a tax cheat than it is making money. We're heading into scary times because we're on the edge of two kind of ideologies. The hooray for me and the heck with everybody else kind of mentality that you get from the right, and one on the left that's trying to compete with how do we make people's lives better and pull some of the people on the right to help. And I hate using that right-left frame because it's really, in the world that we live in, it's the rich and the poor. But sadly, the rich own our political class. It used to be, and I used to joke about this all the time. I used to say, the sad reality is the rich have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. There are more of us. We can vote. We can vote them out of office. We can bring people in who are going to do the right things. And in fact, conservatives used to be concerned about that, which is why they didn't go as far as they've gone. Because eventually the people get enraged and they throw bums out. But you look at the rage that we see today, and this is where, it's bizarre to me. The rage today is someone else has something that I don't have. How do we take that from them? The rage today is in some weird spots. And look, I understand the anger. I grew up in communities where factories left and families struggled. And you had a government that didn't pay attention. And look, Joe Biden doesn't get everything right. But in talking about remaking our manufacturing base, in talking about remaking our economy the way it was when my grandparents' generation ruled the roost, that's the right direction. Returning reward to work is never a bad idea. It is always a good policy. And that's what the infrastructure bill is. The fact that they were able to keep prevailing wage in it is a huge win. And the Build Back Better plan for me is an investment. Is it enough? Is it targeted in all the right places? No. But it's targeted in a lot of good places. And while there are some like Joe Manchin who say, no, we should be doing these individually, knowing that this would take forever. And that's the point, to slow down what we the people want. I've yet to find someone, when you start talking about just issue, should children be able to have access to pre-K? The majority of people say, absolutely, we want that. We need kids to be ready for school. We need to do better in education. Should we help families with childcare? Yeah, because families are struggling. We are now in a world where one income doesn't cut it anymore. Wages have been so depressed that one income doesn't do it. Should we help families put food on the table? Even conservatives say yes. Because if you remember, the program that helps the poor, the Earned Income Tax Credit, was actually signed into law by Ronald Reagan. It was an Uncle Milty plan. So conservatives used to believe this stuff. What we see now is the people running the Republican Party, they're not conservatives. They're radicals. They're corporatists. They're people who want incredibly dangerous changes to move us towards more fascistic type policies. And that is dangerous. To me, that's dangerous. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Back after that. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2001. That was the day that energy trading giant Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was the biggest bankruptcy in U.S. history up to that time. At its peak, the Houston-based Enron was the 7th largest company in the country. A combination of mismanagement and all-out greed sank Enron. The company used numerous accounting tricks and loopholes to hide billions of dollars of debt from its shareholders. In August of 2000, shares of the company were worth $90.75. But by November 30th, 2001, they had plummeted to just 26 cents. After filing bankruptcy, thousands of Enron employees were left to go down with the ship. Many employees and retirees had thousands of dollars worth of Enron stock. Employees were told the company would recover. They were encouraged not to sell off their stock and even to buy more, while at the same time, top executives were dumping their stock holdings. When the company went under, the employees' retirement accounts were wiped out. Some who had already retired had to re-enter the workforce. The following January, a New York Times report shared the stories of some of the 4,000 employees laid off in the immediate aftermath of the bankruptcy. One was told he lost his job by voicemail. Another was told he had 30 minutes to clear out his desk. Multiple lawsuits won a portion of the money back for Enron stockholders. But the employees lost more than $2 billion in retirement funds. In the end, more than 20 top executives were found guilty for the crimes they committed while running the company. Enron became synonymous with the corporate greed that has been the hallmark of 21st century America. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, here's an interesting story. Sidney Powell, you may remember her name. She was one of Trump's lawyers. They're the ones who made up all these fanciful claims of election fraud and voter fraud and all of this stuff. Had some really great, had some great fables. Didn't bother to take many of them into the court of law, however. But evidently, the state of Michigan, evidently they're going to get a little money back. The state of Michigan and Detroit, I guess, went after the lawyers, Sidney Powell and the rest of them. And this judge, the U.S. District Judge Linda Parker, she has ruled that Powell, Linwood, and others should be sanctioned, and that they were going to have to pay $175,000 back to Michigan and the city of Detroit. Good for them. Now, every other place where they did their little song and dance and dog and pony show, maybe they should go after them and dig into their pockets a little bit more for the nonsense that they pulled. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, the big one being the debt ceiling. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Sydney's in a couple other stories today, too.
Yeah, she's all over the place. Very popular.
This is the latest breaking news on Sidney Powell. And there's the disbarring for lying in court. That's a biggie. And then federal prosecutors are seeking records of fundraising groups that she launched. So,
well, I mean, that's what happens when you think that the former guy has your back.
Right. I mean, I think she will pay some kind of price,
Yeah, I think Linwood as well, and ultimately Rudy too. I mean, at some point, all of the dog and pony shows and all the things they did in court and around, at some point, it's got to come back to him.
I don't understand how he has escaped, his work with the Ukraine, not filing as a foreign lobbyist. I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah, have you heard anything?
Escaped all that.
Have you heard anything about him lately?
Nothing, zero, except when he was shaving at the airport at the lunch table.
Does that mean he's homeless? No, I'm not saying that.
I don't think so. Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't heard. Now that I think about it, I haven't heard anything from him. I guess he's been banned from Fox News, but he hasn't even been on the crazy stations.
Right.
Or the crazier stations.
Yeah, I just think he's laid low because even Rudy knows when he could be in trouble.
Yeah, well, at least I hope so. Interesting statement by Liz Cheney. She said that there's going to be in the new year. There's being rapid progress being made, but in the new year there are going to be multiple weeks of public hearings. They're going to set out for the American people, in her words, in vivid color, exactly what happened every minute of the day on January 6th at the Capitol and at the White House, and what led to the violent attacks in vivid color, Bob. We're going to see every bit of it.
Right. She had said that, and then also she was warning of consequences for Trump in his dealings with the committee itself. And I think that was just yesterday she said something about that, that he would be held responsible for any falsehood exchanged with the panel.
So do you think the Republicans are a little kind of regretting not putting people on the panel?
Well, it was a huge mistake. Look, I can remember a time, for example, when Cuba was the official host through the UN for a minority rights conference, right? And it was down in Africa, South Africa, I think. And we were sort of like boycotted, banned from going to it because Cuba was hosting it. I argued at that time with Sheila Jackson Lee. We both argued that, there's no use to do these bans because Cuba hosted it. Well, this is the same type of thought. Fine. Democrats constituted the committee. Republicans didn't like, so we're going to take our toys and go home. And that's not the way. If you're on the committee, you have a voice. Yeah. Sure, you can say things to the media, but if you're right there, it's the best thing, as you know, that can happen.
Yeah, it's crazy that they just kind of backed out of it, because now you're basically giving the other side the ability, whatever they want. Exactly. So the question that I have then is, is the calculus, they know that their supporters aren't going to listen to it anyway, have an alternative reality, and it's not going to hurt them politically. Do you think that's the calculus?
Well, I think so. I mean, look, the committee was constant. I mean, there's some downsides. Now, if Liz Cheney is correct, then there's going to be some upsides, but there's some downsides. It was constituted really late. Justice did finally, step in and start to pursue people that weren't, were thinking about not showing up so they wouldn't. That helps for future witnesses. That gives it a little bit of life. But on the other hand, the Republicans were going to have this alternative, constant alternative to it, and that never came about. So I just think it would have been better to have been on there, and then every step of the way they can argue.
Yeah. Now they say that there are members of Congress that they're investigating as well. Are you surprised by that?
Well, nothing surprises me anymore. I guess what would surprise me is if members, it's just when I served there, it was different. But if members were, giving information to people, and it led towards, having the ability to know about some of the, places to go inside the building, then I just would be in total shock that somebody would do something so treasonous.
Would you use that word? I mean, because some of the
yes,
some of the stories coming out is that there were members of Congress who gave tours. You have James Clyburn who's saying, "Look, I've got an office that nobody should have been able to find, yet somehow they were able to find it." If someone would have pointed that out, you're going to go that level?
Yes, I absolutely. If they participated in knowingly going beyond just, some people wanted to come to the Capitol that happened to be in D.C. that day, and they went beyond that and told where the hideaways. Representative Clyburn's talking about the hideaways. I had one. Not many members have them. There's some, and they're basically secret places in the Capitol where that's why they're called hideaways, and they're private rooms that you have if you're in leadership or something of that nature. Some of the people, and you can use them to go up to the floor, come back, do business, make phone calls, those types of things. And if people found out where they are, those rooms, I don't want to go any farther with this because, right. But if people found out where those rooms are, because you can't, if I took you in the Capitol, Rick, and I took you in hallways, and I said, tell me where the rooms are, you couldn't. You really couldn't.
No, I've gone through the Capitol, and I'm lost most of the time anyway.
No, right. So I think if they did directly say, hey, there's his office, and you're coming in the Capitol, I think it's treason, sure.
Yeah, and you got to wonder how they knew which windows weren't secure, and because they seem to hit all the right places.
Mm-hmm. They did.
Yeah. Also wanted to get your thoughts. It seems that the ticking bomb has been diffused, that we're not going to be shutting down the government this week, or at least that's what the report that I'm seeing right now. I don't know if the Senate has officially passed it yet, but that seems to be the reporting coming out.
Well, I think so. Look, Trump said use this as leverage. Republicans were starting to say we're not going to do that. He became very unhappy, obviously. And if you really look at McConnell's history, he's not the stop the debt ceiling guy. He did last time. Then he provided 11 votes. He played that game. But in general, I think he knew that you didn't want to play the game of chicken of who would do this. Now it's going to be temporary, but it still will serve the purpose to not have some bad things happen.
Yeah, get to the other side of Christmas is because what I'm hearing is the deal is sometime mid-February. But my problem again, and we've had this conversation 1,000 times. Why do we even have this? It seems ridiculous.
Well, it was something, again, it's not constitutional. It's created by Congress. It could be uncreated by Congress. The hypocrisy of it, and you and I have said this 100 times, is that if you want to be fiscally prudent and a fiscal hawk, go through the budget process. This is after the horse is running down the path. This is paying for things already, voted upon. So it's not a fiscal responsible vote.
Yeah.
And we really particularly honestly don't need it.
But what it does is it shows how dysfunctional our government is. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. The rest of the world is looking at us and going, is this the most powerful nation in the world? Is this the nation who should have the global currency, which the vast majority of business on this planet is done in? Are these the people that should be running things? I got to tell you, if I'm looking in through the outside, I'm going, no.
And then the media loves this. Oh, they're going to the edge, all the drama.
Yeah.
I'm looking like, okay, something's going to happen. Something will work out.
Now, did you need the 60 votes to pass this debt ceiling in the Senate?
Yes, they would have to have 60. Well, they can continue to try to put it into reconciliation, but they waste a vote if they do that. They can only do reconciliation on issues so many times.
Right.
So they're not going to do that. So remember, McConnell had to provide the 11 votes. Now, of course, they can do away with that if they've got the votes. Period. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think McConnell wants to.
Cloture is not constitutional.
Because that's how you stop things from happening.
I mean, it'd be like tomorrow morning, to give this the best example of saying instead of 218 votes in the House, we now need 240. To bring a bill up. We just changed it. That's what the Senate did years ago.
Yeah. It's nuts, just nuts. Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Supreme Court hearing yesterday and the fallout. Any additional thoughts on what we saw coming out of our Supreme Court?
Well, finally in June they will, most likely do something. If they go with Mississippi, it looks like that may happen. I thought Kavanaugh made some, interesting comments originally, but it would take the abortion issue and would allow states to do what Mississippi is doing and make it 15 weeks. Now, again, 90% of the abortions that occur are in 13 weeks. But, basically nobody wants to see, it go to 15, and maybe next time there's a state that takes the Supreme Court and it goes to 12. Who knows? But again, it won't affect statistically 90%, but then there's the 10% obviously it does affect. Yeah. So I don't think it'll be a total reversal, but it's obviously going to have an impact.
Yeah, because I firmly, if this goes, I expect, very soon there's going to be another one to do what you said, keep whittling it down to eventually it's all gone. And then it goes back to the states. And, I've got some of my Democratic strategist friends going, this might not be a bad thing if that were to revert back to the states, because then you have something to get people riled up about. And I guess that's an interesting, kind of interesting way to look at it.
Well, it is, and Republicans, by the way, in the powers to be, are not real excited about this. They might be excited about the substance of the debate at the court, but they aren't excited, Rick, about this coming up now because they want to keep it economy and immigration, and of course the virus. They don't want this in June, maybe igniting the troops, should we say?
No, that's an excellent point. But here's the thing: the dog caught the car. This is something Republicans have been pushing for a long time.
And caught the car in the wrong year. Right.
It'll be interesting to see if the dog gets run over.
It will.
It just is what it is. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff.
Thank you.
Our good friend, Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. This is one of those moments. They caught the car. For years, the Republicans have told us that they're going to do this. This is one of their key issues. And it may end up biting them in the behind next election year, because I don't expect this decision to come out until June, as the justices are leaving town, because, seeking cover, because I think to steal a Steve Bannon line, what's going to break loose. Because there are so many people who are sure that this wasn't going to happen. So many people sure that, Susan Collins, she looked into their soul and they weren't going to go after this. And you go, of course they were. It was one of the things that the Federalist Society made sure that they were right on, along with all of the business stuff. And I always go back to, Tom DeLay, did this little spiel about, if we had all the kids that were aborted, we could have all those cheap laborers. Ultimately, that's what's in their mind. We can have all these poor kids born because we can put them to work doing cheap work, and ultimately drop the bottom out of the economy. That's really what they're about. This whole pro-life nonsense, I'm not buying it for a minute. Because if they were truly pro-life, their policies would show that in every other way possible. Their budgets would show that. But it doesn't. What we see more corporate greed. We see more handouts to the very wealthy, and more demonizing of the poor and the downtrodden. Exactly everything opposite of what we're told the Christian nation should be going after. Just my thought, just my opinion, but it's what we're seeing coming out of them. Now for me, I'm gonna be glued to whatever happens in the new year on these hearings, because it's my view this should have been happening already. We should have had perp walks already. We should have had people with nice brand new shiny bracelets, and nice orange outfits for their new domicile. If Liz Cheney's right, and they do lay this out in vivid color, to use her words, exactly what happens every minute of every day, the question then comes back to, will it matter? Will it move the needle? Will the ardent Trump supporter find an epiphany? Will there be a moment where they go, that's too far? I don't know. I have hope. Not the kind of hope that makes me irrationally hopeful, but I do have a little hope that maybe we can find that common ground that we used to have. We weren't all singing Kumbaya together. There were fights, but we were more in the middle of the road than not. Because here's the sad reality. While we're involved in this bickering, this fighting, this tearing each other apart, there are kids going to bed hungry. There are veterans going to bed homeless. There are families that are struggling. And for me, every day we don't get something done to make people's lives better is a wasted day. And today in Congress, you look at the fact that they're fighting over this debt ceiling. Sorry, it's a wasted day. We should have been doing something. And they weren't. And one side of the political aisle is happy with that. Because they don't believe in government. They don't believe government can help or should help. The weird thing is I still know some Republicans who don't feel that way. Who think like I do, that government does what we cannot do individually. Gives us the opportunity to collectively get things done. And we all want the same things, I think. I do. I still believe that. We want good, safe neighborhoods for our kids. We want opportunities for them. We want health care. We want retirement security. We want good paying jobs. Those are the things we should be focusing on. And anyone who's just looking for attention, i.e. Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Gates, Gohmert, the rest of them, we got to set aside. Got to let it go. It's kind of where I've gone with the anti-vax people. Got to let them go. We spend too much time protecting people from themselves. You don't want to get vaccinated, don't. But what's going to happen to you, that's on you. Just for me, that simple. And it doesn't get any simpler than that because they're clearly not going to listen. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Follow us on social media on Twitter @RickSmithShow. We do the Facebook thing as you want to throw a message there. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe, share, all of that. All good stuff. I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.